Welcome to Simply English.
How to adopt a British accent while speaking English, and hopefully by the end of this, we'll all be sounding a bit more posh. So, is it really possible to just completely change your accent?
Well, I think your brain is kind of like a sponge when it comes to language.
Okay.
It's incredibly adaptable. While losing every trace of your original accent might be tough, a convincing British accent is very doable
Yeah.
if you put in the effort.
So it is possible.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So the guide kicks off by saying that we need to pick like a specific accent to focus on.
Right.
It's not as simple as just saying like British accent. They mention things like received pronunciation, Cockney, and Northern accents.
Uh-huh.
Honestly, I'm already feeling a bit lost. Where do we even begin?
It's easy to get overwhelmed, but think of it this way. British accent is like this giant umbrella.
Right.
And under it, you have all these distinct regional variations.
Oh, okay.
The guide recommends starting with received pronunciation, sometimes called BBC English. It's considered the standard, and it's been studied extensively, making it a really solid base for learners.
So kind of like learning the proper way first
Yes.
before trying out like the more colorful, we'll say, regional accents. Okay, I get it. But why is RP considered the easiest? Is it really that much simpler than the others?
It's like learning classical music.
Okay.
Before jumping into jazz or rock, mastering those fundamentals gives you more flexibility to improvise later on.
Okay.
RP provides a clear framework with well-defined pronunciation rules, making it easier to grasp the basics.
Okay. All right. That makes sense.
Yeah.
But if it's so straightforward, why don't we all sound like BBC newsreaders already? It can't be that easy, right?
Yeah, it's like any skill.
Yeah.
It takes dedication and practice. But starting with RP can definitely streamline the process. Then the guide jumps into mastering vowel sounds.
Okay.
And apparently, British and American English are worlds apart in that department.
Yeah, it says we really need to pay attention to those vowels. For example, the A in words like fast sounds more like ah in British English.
Right.
It even gave a phonetic transcription for beached instead of faced. I'm not going to lie, those symbols look a bit intimidating.
They do. Don't worry, those phonetic symbols are just a way to visually represent sounds. Think of them as like a more precise way of spelling out the pronunciation. For example, that A, as in father sound, is represented by the A symbol.
Okay.
It helps to see the difference between the American A, like in cat, and the British A.
Gotcha. Okay, so it's like a code
Exactly.
for understanding pronunciation.
Yes.
Okay. The guide also mentions the O being more rounded and the U in words like stupid or duty sounding like ew. Got any like insider tips on those?
Absolutely. It's all about subtle shifts in how you shape your mouth. The O in hot, for instance, is pronounced further back in your throat, almost like you're about to yawn. And for that ew sound in words like duty, imagine you're adding a tiny Y sound before the ooh, almost like duty. It might feel a bit strange at first,
Yeah.
but with practice, it'll become second nature.
Next up is something called the non-rhotic R.
Oh, yeah.
What exactly is that all about? It sounds a bit like a secret linguistic society.
It's not as complicated as it sounds. In British English, if an R isn't followed by a vowel, it's usually silent. So words like car would sound more like ka,
Okay.
and better loses that hard R at the end.
So no rolling RRs like pirates then?
No.
Okay. I guess that stereotype isn't entirely accurate. But wait, the guide mentioned something called a linking R?
Yes.
What's that about?
That's where it gets interesting. It's this cool little trick where the silent R kind of reappears when the next word starts with a vowel. For example, in Law and Order, the R at the end of law subtly connects to the A in and, making it sound almost like law and order.
That makes sense.
Yes.
It's like the R is just hiding, waiting for its chance to jump back in.
Exactly.
But it's not all about the R, right? We also need to pay attention to our T's, apparently.
Yes. In American English, we tend to soften our T's between vowels, make them sound almost like D's. But in British English, that T keeps its crispness.
Okay.
Think of water. We might pronounce it more like water, but in British English, it's a clear water.
Wow, I never realized how much I was softening those T's.
Right.
It's amazing how such a small difference can have like a big impact on the overall sound.
Huge.
It's like a secret code to sounding more British.
It is. And while we're talking about subtle differences, we can't forget about stress and intonation.
Right.
That's what really gives British English its musical quality.
Right. The guide mentions this like up and down rhythm in British speech.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like sentences kind of rise and fall more,
Yeah.
giving it like a melodic quality. It even says that questions have a different intonation pattern.
They do.
This is where I start to get really confused.
It's all about the music of the language. In American English, our voices tend to rise at the end of a question, but in British English, they often fall, which can sound a bit unexpected to our ears.
So, like, if you were to ask, "You're going to the party," it would sound more like a statement than a question to
Yeah.
us. I can already hear the difference in my head.
Right.
It's like picturing Benedict Cumberbatch saying it.
Exactly. And speaking of Benedict Cumberbatch, the guide suggests something called shadowing native speakers. Basically, we listen to British podcasts, audiobooks, or movies and repeat what we hear.
So are we talking like full-on parrot mode here?
I mean, yeah, kind of.
Okay.
It sounds a bit intense, but it makes sense. By mimicking how native speakers pronounce words and phrases, you start to internalize those nuances. It's like learning by osmosis.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be like all serious study, right?
No,
You can make it fun.
of course.
Put on your favorite British film, try to speak along with the characters. It's like acting class and language learning all rolled into one.
Exactly.
This is making me want to rewatch all the Harry Potter films, strictly for research purposes, of course.
Excellent choice. Emma Watson's pronunciation is incredibly clear and perfect for imitation. Plus, who doesn't love a good Harry Potter marathon?
Right.
But before we get lost in the world of Hogwarts, there's one more element we need to talk about: British slang and phrasing.
Now we're talking. The guide gives examples like fancy, proper, and cheers. I'm already feeling more British just saying those words, but I have to admit, I'm not quite sure how to use them properly.
Think of these words as spices that add flavor to your speech. Fancy is like asking if you desire something, like fancy a Koopa. Proper emphasizes something being genuine or authentic. You might say, that was a proper good meal. And cheers is a versatile word for expressing gratitude or saying goodbye.
Okay, I'm definitely adding cheers, mate, to my vocabulary. Now, if only I could pull off that Cockney accent.
Right.
Speaking of which, the guide mentions Cockney and Northern accents, but doesn't really dive into them.
Yeah.
What makes those accents so different from RP?
That's where things get even more interesting. While RP is considered the standard, each region in Britain has its own distinct flavor. Cockney, for example, is famous for its rhyming slang and unique vowel sounds,
Okay.
while Northern accents have a distinct melody and rhythm all their own.
It's like each accent has its own personality
Yeah.
and story to tell. So how do we go from, like, mastering the basics of RP to sounding like we're straight out of a Guy Ritchie film or a Yorkshire pub?
Right.
Do we need to become linguistic chameleons?
Well, mastering RP is like laying the foundation for your accent house.
Okay.
Once you've got that down, you can start adding those regional flourishes.
Oh, okay.
It's like learning to cook. You start with the basic techniques and then experiment with different cuisines and flavors.
So it's all about building on what we've learned
Yeah.
and not being afraid to experiment.
Exactly.
But it's not just about mimicking sounds, right? There's a whole cultural element to accents that we need to consider.
You're absolutely right. Each accent carries with it a history, a way of life, a set of social nuances. To truly embody an accent, you need to appreciate the culture it represents. It's about more than just sounding the part.
Right.
It's about understanding the people and the history behind the language.
Wow, I'm starting to see that this deep dive into British accents is like more than just a vocal exercise. It's a cultural exploration.
It is.
This has been an eye-opening conversation. I'm feeling inspired to not only like try on a British accent, but to delve deeper into the fascinating world of accents, like in general.
Yeah. That's the beauty of language learning. It opens doors to new worlds and new perspectives. And who knows, maybe one day we'll be doing a deep dive on the intricacies of a Texan drawl or a Boston accent. The possibilities are endless.
Now that would be an adventure. But before we wander too far from our British Isles, I think it's time to address the elephant in the room.
The elephant in the room. I'm intrigued.
Well, we've talked about like all the technical aspects of adopting a British accent.
Yeah.
But what about the bigger picture? Does changing our accent like change how we perceive ourselves or how others perceive us?
That's a profound question.
Yeah.
It delves into the realm of identity, perception, and the complex relationship between language and self.
Exactly. It makes me think about how we often associate certain accents with particular personality traits or social groups. Do you think that by like consciously adopting a new accent, we're also adopting those like associated perceptions? It's like we're stepping into a different persona. But does that persona change us?
That's a question each individual must grapple with for themselves. There's no easy answer, but it's certainly a thought-provoking aspect of accent adoption.
This deep dive into British accents has led us down a rabbit hole of questions about identity, perception, and the power of language to shape our reality.
And that's the beauty of deep dives, isn't it?
Yeah.
They take us beyond the surface level and into the depths of a subject, revealing unexpected connections and thought-provoking insights.
This has been an incredible journey. We've gone from, like, dissecting vowel sounds to pondering the philosophical implications of accent adoption.
It's quite a range.
And we've only just scratched the surface. There's a whole world of accents out there, each with its own story to tell.
A whole world.
So where do we go from here? We've got this toolkit, for adopting your British accent, but now I'm kind of wondering about the why behind it all.
What's fascinating here is that the motivation for accent adoption can vary widely. For some, it's purely practical, perhaps for work or travel. For others, it's about connecting with their heritage or expressing admiration for another culture.
It's like putting on a different hat, or in this case, a different voice. You get to step into another world and see things from a fresh perspective.
You do.
I'm definitely feeling that sense of, like, playfulness now. I'm already picturing myself ordering a cuppa at my local coffee shop just to see what happens.
I encourage you to embrace that playful spirit.
Okay.
Language is meant to be enjoyed.
Yeah.
And experimenting with accents is a wonderful way to expand your linguistic horizons.
So for our listeners who are now eager to embark on their own British accent journey, what parting advice would you offer?
I would say embrace the process. Don't get too hung up on perfection. Instead, focus on the joy of discovery. Listen attentively, mimic fearlessly, and most importantly, have fun with it.
That's fantastic advice. It's a reminder that language learning isn't about, like, rigid rules. It's about exploration, expression, and connection.
It is.
And who knows, maybe along the way we'll discover something new about ourselves as well.
Indeed. The journey of language learning is often a journey of self-discovery. It challenges us to step outside of our comfort zones, to embrace new sounds and new ways of thinking. And in doing so, we expand not only our linguistic repertoire, but also our understanding of the world and our place in it.
Well said. This has been an incredible deep dive into the world of British accents.
Yeah.
We've covered everything from the technical aspects of pronunciation to the deeper cultural and personal implications. I think I can speak for both of us when I say that we've learned a great deal, and we hope our listeners have too.
It's been my pleasure to join you on this fascinating exploration. And for our listeners, I'll leave you with this final thought.
Okay.
Beyond the specific accents we've discussed today, there's a vast and vibrant world of regional accents within Britain waiting to be discovered. From the rolling hills of Scotland to the bustling streets of London, each region has its own unique linguistic tapestry, woven from history, culture, and identity. So if you're feeling adventurous, I encourage you to delve deeper and explore the rich diversity of British accents that lie beyond the scope of our episode today.
That's a wonderful invitation to continue the journey. And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive. Thank you for joining us, and cheers until next time.
Yeah, it really is fascinating how these subtle shifts in pronunciation can create such distinct regional identities.
Wow.
It's like each accent has its own story to tell, a glimpse into the history and culture of its speakers.
It's funny you should say that because this guide emphasizes the importance of practice and consistency when it comes to adopting a new accent. But isn't there a risk of losing a bit of your own identity in the process? I mean, if we're constantly trying to sound like someone else, do we end up losing ourselves a little bit?
That's a really thought-provoking question. Yeah.
It touches upon that delicate balance between embracing new ways of speaking and preserving our own unique voices.
Right.
It's a bit like trying on different clothes.
Okay.
You might enjoy experimenting with styles, but ultimately you want to wear something that feels authentic to you.
Right. I guess it's like finding that sweet spot where you can appreciate and adopt elements of a new accent without losing sight of who you are.
Exactly.
It's not about becoming a different person, but rather expanding your linguistic repertoire.
Yes.
And maybe even gaining a deeper understanding of yourself in the process.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Think of it as adding another tool to your communication toolbox.
Okay.
You're not replacing your original voice. You're simply gaining the ability to adapt and connect with others on a deeper level.
I like that analogy.
Yeah.
It takes away the pressure of feeling like I have to completely transform myself
Right.
to sound more British.
Yeah.
It's more about like adding a new layer, a new dimension to my own way of speaking. Precisely. And as we delve further into this world of accents,
Yeah.
it's important to remember that language is constantly evolving.
Right.
It's a living, breathing thing shaped by cultural influences, historical events,
Yeah.
and the interactions of its speakers.
That makes me think about how accents can sometimes be perceived as more than just a way of speaking.
Yeah.
They can carry stereotypes and assumptions,
Well, absolutely.
both positive and negative.
Yes.
Have you ever noticed how people react differently
Oh, yeah.
depending on your accent?
All the time.
Yeah.
You've hit upon a crucial point.
Yeah.
Accents can evoke strong reactions,
Right.
often based on unconscious biases and preconceived notions.
Yeah.
A British accent might be associated with intelligence or sophistication,
Right.
while a Southern drawl might conjure images of hospitality or a slower pace of life.
Right.
It's fascinating how these perceptions are formed and how they can influence our interactions.
It's like we're constantly judging and being judged based on the way we speak.
Yep.
It makes you wonder if we're truly listening to what someone is saying,
Right.
or if we're more focused on how they're saying it.
Exactly. That's a great observation.
Yeah.
It highlights the importance of being mindful of our own biases
Right.
and recognizing that accents are simply a reflection of someone's linguistic background,
Yeah.
not their intelligence or character.
This conversation has made me realize that learning about accents
Yeah,
is about so much more than just pronunciation.
it is.
It's about understanding the history, the culture,
Huh.
the social dynamics, and even the psychology behind the way people speak.
You summed it up perfectly.
Yeah.
It's a journey into the heart of human communication,
Right.
exploring how language shapes our identities, perceptions, and connections.
I have to admit, when we started this deep dive,
Yeah.
I was mainly focused on the technical aspects of adopting a British accent.
Uh-huh.
But now I'm realizing that it's so much more than that.
Right.
It's a journey into the rich tapestry
Yeah.
of language and culture.
Yeah.
A way to connect with others on a deeper level and to gain a new appreciation for the power of our own voices.
It's been a true pleasure exploring these nuances with you.
Yeah.
And I believe our listeners are also beginning to see the depth and complexity of this fascinating topic.
Absolutely. And I have a feeling this conversation is far from over.
Right.
There's still so much to uncover, so many questions to ask,
Yeah.
and so many accents to explore. But for now, I think it's time to shift gears
Okay.
and delve into the practical side of things.
All right.
This guide we've been discussing offers some concrete advice
Yeah.
on how to actually go about practicing and developing a British accent.
Uh-huh.
Are you ready to get into the nitty-gritty?
I'm all ears. Let's dive into the practical tips and techniques that can help our listeners embark on their own accent adventures.
All right. The guide suggests a few methods for refining pronunciation and tracking progress.
Okay.
One of them is recording yourself speaking
Yeah.
and comparing it to a native British speaker saying the same thing. Do you think that's a helpful exercise?
Absolutely. It's like having a personal accent coach in your pocket.
Okay.
By listening back to your own recordings and comparing them to a native speaker,
Right.
you can identify areas where you might be straying from the target accent.
Yeah.
It's a great way to pinpoint those subtle nuances that might be difficult to catch on your own.
So it's all about training your ear and becoming more aware of those subtle differences in pronunciation, intonation, and rhythm.
Exactly.
It's like fine-tuning an instrument until it produces the desired sound.
Yes.
But what about those moments when we get stuck? What if we're struggling to master a particular sound or phrase?
Well, the guide emphasizes the importance of patience and perseverance.
Okay.
Learning a new accent is a journey, not a destination.
Right.
It's bound to have its challenges and setbacks.
Yeah, it's reassuring to know that it's okay to stumble along the way.
Right.
I guess it's all about embracing the process and not being too hard on ourselves. What other tips does the guide offer for staying motivated and making progress?
The guide encourages us to create a fun and engaging learning environment.
Okay.
Surround yourself with British media, listen to podcasts and audiobooks,
Right.
watch movies and TV shows.
Yeah.
It's about immersing yourself in the language and culture as much as possible.
It's like creating a little British bubble around yourself,
Yeah,
a space where you can absorb the sounds and rhythms of the language naturally.
Exactly.
It sounds like a fun and effective way to learn.
It is.
But what about interacting with native speakers?
Oh, that's crucial.
Is that an important part of the process?
Absolutely. There's no substitute for real-life conversation.
Right.
If you have the opportunity to chat with native British speakers, seize it.
Okay.
It's a chance to practice what you've learned,
Mm.
to pick up on those subtle nuances of pronunciation and intonation,
Yeah.
and to gain valuable feedback.
It's like taking your accent skills out for a test drive.
Yes.
But I imagine it could be a bit intimidating at first. What if you make mistakes or feel self-conscious?
Remember, everyone makes mistakes when learning a new language.
All right.
Native speakers are generally very understanding and appreciative of your efforts.
Okay.
Don't be afraid to ask for clarification or to have them repeat something you didn't quite catch.
It's a reminder that learning a new accent is about connecting with others and embracing the journey.
Yeah.
It's not about achieving perfection, but about expanding our linguistic horizons
Exactly.
and having fun along the way.
Yeah.
Speaking of fun,
Yeah.
we haven't even touched upon those delightful British idioms and colloquialisms
Right.
that can add so much flavor to our speech.
Ah, yes, those delightful turns of phrase.
I'm eager to hear more.
Yeah.
It's like adding those finishing touches to our accent masterpiece. So where do we begin?
Well, let's start with a few essentials. Bob's your uncle is a fun way to say it's easy or no problem.
Okay.
And if something is a bit of a mess, you might say it's gone pear-shaped.
On pear-shaped.
Yeah.
I like that.
These little phrases can really add authenticity and charm to your British accent.
I love it. I can already imagine myself casually dropping Bob's your uncle into everyday conversations.
Yeah.
It's sure to raise a few eyebrows.
Yeah.
But beyond the individual phrases,
Yeah.
is there a certain attitude or mindset that can help us embrace the spirit of British slang?
It's all about embracing a sense of playfulness and wit.
Okay.
British humor often relies on wordplay and double meanings.
Right.
So be prepared for a bit of a linguistic roller coaster.
It sounds like a delightful challenge.
It is.
And I have a feeling this is just the tip of the iceberg.
Oh, yeah.
There's a whole world of British slang waiting to be explored.
Absolutely.
But before we get too carried away with our apples and pears,
Right.
I think it's time to circle back to our main goal.
Okay.
We've covered so much ground,
We have.
from the technical aspects of pronunciation to the cultural and social implications of accents.
It's been an incredible journey.
We've delved into the intricacies of vowel sounds,
Yeah.
explored the nuances of intonation and rhythm,
Uh-huh.
and even pondered the philosophical questions surrounding identity and perception.
We've covered it all.
And through it all, we've gained a deeper appreciation for the power of language to connect us, to shape our perceptions,
Yes.
and to enrich our lives.
It's quite a power.
But I think there's one final question we need to address.
Okay.
We've talked about the how and the why of adopting a British accent. But what about the so what? Why does any of this matter?
Yeah.
What can our listeners take away from this deep dive?
That's a great question. Ultimately, this exploration into British accents is about more than just mimicking sounds.
Okay.
It's about expanding our understanding of language, culture, and communication.
Right.
It's about embracing diversity and appreciating the richness of human expression.
It's about challenging our preconceived notions
Yes.
and stepping outside of our comfort zones to connect with others on a deeper level.
Absolutely.
And who knows, maybe along the way we'll discover something new about ourselves as well.
Indeed. The journey of language learning is often a journey of self-discovery.
Right?
And I believe our listeners are well on their way to embarking on their own fascinating adventures.
So for those who are eager to put their newfound knowledge into practice,
Yeah.
what parting advice would you offer?
Embrace the journey.
Okay.
Don't be afraid to experiment, to make mistakes, and to have fun with it.
Yeah.
The world of accents is a vast and vibrant one.
It is.
And there's something truly magical about being able to navigate it with confidence and grace.
Well said. And on that note, I think it's time to bring this deep dive to a close.
Okay.
But before we say cheerio, I want to thank our listeners for joining us on this incredible adventure.
It's been a pleasure sharing this journey with you all.
And remember, the exploration doesn't end here.
No.
There's a whole world of accents out there waiting to be discovered. So keep listening, keep learning, and keep exploring the fascinating world of language and communication.
Absolutely.
Until next time, cheers. You know, it's amazing how much we've uncovered. Just by taking a deep dive into this one guide on British accents, I feel like I've not only learned practical tips, but also gained a whole new perspective on language and identity.
It's true, isn't it? We
Nice.
often take our own accents for granted, but when we start to analyze the nuances of other accents,
Yeah.
it opens up a whole new world of understanding about communication and culture.
And what's really fascinating is how accents can change over time,
Yeah.
almost like fashion trends.
Right.
Think about how British accents in films have evolved over the decades.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, like, what factors drive those shifts?
It's a combination of things. Social mobility, exposure to different dialects through media, even conscious choices people make about how they want to present themselves.
Right.
It all plays a role. For example, some linguists believe that the estuary English accent,
Okay.
sort of blend between Cockney and RP,
Right.
emerged as people from different social backgrounds started to interact more frequently in London.
So it's like language is a living organism,
It is.
constantly adapting and evolving to reflect the changing dynamics of society.
It is.
That makes me think about the impact of globalization and the internet.
Yeah.
Are we seeing like a homogenization of accents as people from all over the world connect online?
Right.
Or are regional accents becoming even more pronounced as a way of preserving local identities?
That's a question that linguists are grappling with right now.
Yeah.
There's evidence to support both sides of the argument.
Okay.
On the one hand, increased exposure to different accents through media and online interactions could lead to a blending of pronunciation patterns.
Right.
But on the other hand, people might cling even more tightly to their regional dialects as a way of asserting their cultural identity in an increasingly globalized world.
It's almost like a tug of war between these forces of homogenization and diversification.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see how things play out in the coming years. But for now, I think we've given our listeners plenty to chew on.
I agree. We've covered a lot of ground, from the technical aspects of pronunciation to the broader social and cultural implications of accents.
And I hope our listeners are walking away with a newfound appreciation for the beauty and complexity of language.
Absolutely.
Maybe they'll even feel inspired to try out a British accent themselves.
I would encourage them to do so.
Yeah.
It's a fun and rewarding experience, and who knows, it might even open up new doors in their lives.
Well said. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive. A huge thank you to our expert for joining us today and sharing their insights.
The pleasure was all mine. It's always a joy to delve into the fascinating world of language.
And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in and joining us on this linguistic adventure. Until next time, keep those ears open, keep those tongues wagging, and keep exploring the wonderful world of accents. Cheers.
Thanks for watching this video from Simply English, an educational channel for all ages and all stages. If you're new to this channel and enjoyed this video, please subscribe and press the like button. If you have any suggestions, please mention them in the comments section. Take care, and goodbye.